It all started with a photo. Simple as that. Not a confession. Not a slip of the tongue. Not even anything she meant for me to see. Just a blurry, over-filtered picture that showed up in a group chat of her former classmates. She was the one who showed me, actually. That's the part that gets me. The part one can't stop going back to. We were sitting on the couch on a Sunday morning, the kind of lazy, quiet morning I used to love. I was halfway through a cup of coffee, scrolling through the news, and she was curled up next to me, laughing at something on her phone. We weren't fighting. We weren't distant. Not obviously, anyway. She turned the screen toward me and said, "Look at these goofballs." Like she was showing me a meme. "Just classmates," she said. "A reunion I didn't attend because I had a client meeting in Atlanta. Nothing special, babe. You didn't miss anything." The first few pictures were harmless. A big group *T with those cheesy wine bar lights in the background. A couple selfies of her and her best friend from college, and then that one. It was maybe the third or fourth photo in, but the second I saw it, my whole body tensed. Maggie, my wife, standing next to her ex-boyfriend, Jason. His hand was resting around her waist. Not in that stiff, half-hearted way people pose with coworkers or distant friends. It was secure, familiar, too comfortable. And the expression on her face. I can't explain it. It wasn't just a smile. It was something else. Her whole posture leaned toward him, not away. Her hand was resting lightly on his chest. She looked happy, or something that resembled it. And when I looked at the background, I realized they weren't posing for the camera. The photo had been taken candidly. Neither of them saw it coming. It wasn't scandalous. There was no kiss, no hand-holding. But I knew what I saw. I didn't say anything right away. I handed the phone back like nothing was wrong, nodded, and mumbled something like, "Looks like you had fun." And then I sat with it. For hours. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. That I was being one of those husbands, paranoid, jealous, emotionally immature. I knew she and Jason had history, sure, but that was old news. College stuff. High school, even. Years behind us. That's what she always said. He was just part of my past, not my future. And yet, that picture stuck with me. By that evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were in the kitchen. She was chopping vegetables for dinner, a new recipe she found on TikTok. I asked her casually, "Hey, that photo with Jason. Were you two talking much at the reunion?" She didn't even look up. "Jason? Not really. Just said hi and caught up for a second." "Why?" I hesitated. "You guys looked close in that one photo." That's when she paused. For just a beat. A micro beat. But I noticed it. Her hands stopped moving, just for a second, before she picked up the knife again and kept chopping. "Oh, that?" she said with a laugh that felt just a little too forced. "You're reading way too much into it. It was literally a 2-second thing. Someone snapped it while we were talking. These old news, babe." She said it lightly, but I could tell she didn't like the question. Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't make eye contact. "I'm not trying to make it a thing," I replied. "It just looked, I don't know, a little more than friendly." That's when she turned around, knife in hand, and gave me the look. Not angry. Worse, disappointed. Like I'd let her down somehow. "Seriously? You're getting jealous over a picture? I wasn't even posing for it. You know how group events are. Everyone's hugging everyone." I stayed quiet. "You don't trust me?" she asked. Not softly, not curiously. Like a trap. Like the kind of question where any answer you give is the wrong one. "I didn't say that," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Well, that's what it sounds like." She *T back, turning back to the cutting board. "You're being weird about nothing. It's honestly kind of insulting." And just like that, I was the one on defense. The conversation shut down. She stirred the pasta sauce with just a little too much aggression, turned up the music slightly, and changed the subject. Later, after dinner, I offered to do the dishes. She said, "Thanks," kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine, and went upstairs to shower. She even brought her phone with her, which, yeah, she usually did. But that night, it felt deliberate, like she was keeping something close. I stood at the sink, scrubbing a plate, and realized how small that moment had been, and yet how heavy it sat on me. This wasn't about a photo anymore. It was about how quickly she shut me down. How fast the topic became my insecurity instead of her behavior. How little interest she showed in reassuring me. It was almost like she had practiced it. The deflection, the indignation, the smooth pivot to, "Why are you always suspicious lately?" But that wasn't true. I wasn't always suspicious. If anything, I'd been too trusting, too naive. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the first red flag. Just the first one I couldn't ignore. The next morning, things went back to normal. She kissed me goodbye before work, same as always. Smiled, told me she'd text me later. And I nodded, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I felt like something had shifted, like a line had been drawn, and we were standing on opposite sides. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. But the more I replayed her reaction, the less sense it made. If there was nothing going on, if it really was as harmless as she claimed, why get so defensive? Why make me feel like I was crazy for asking a simple question? I tried to shake it off that day, buried myself in work. But every time I had a free second, I saw the image again. Her eyes, that soft smile, his hand on her waist like it never left. And the thought kept circling in my head, quiet and awful. What if I just saw the beginning of the truth? Or worse, what if I saw a piece of a story that's already been playing out behind my back? That night, I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't bring it up again. She seemed cheerful, maybe even more affectionate than usual. And I told myself to let it go. But I couldn't, because somewhere deep in my gut, I felt it. This wasn't nothing. This was the start of something unraveling. After the photo, things didn't explode. No big arguments. No midnight confessions. Life went on, at least from the outside looking in. But something inside me had shifted. And once it did, I couldn't stop the slow unraveling of every moment that came before it. The photo wasn't just a red flag. It was a crack in a window I hadn't realized was already splintered. Once I looked through it, I saw things differently, remembered things differently. It started with the small stuff. Little behaviors I had brushed off at the time, but which now came back like puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. The way her phone was always flipped face down on the table. I used to think that was a habit. Some people just do that, right? But I realized it wasn't always that way. She used to leave it face up, even unlocked. Back when she had nothing to hide. Then there were the sleepovers. Not often, just once every month or two, usually on a Friday night. Maggie would say she was staying at a friend's place after a girls' night, too tired to drive back. "We're just watching movies and talking," she said once, tossing her overnight bag over her shoulder. It's harmless. I remember thinking it was nice that she had close friends. Independent time. Space. I didn't want to be the kind of partner who needed to know her every move. But now, looking back, I couldn't even name all the friends she was supposedly staying with. One time it was Natalie. Another time Jess. Once, she said she stayed at a friend from work's place, no name. I never questioned it. I trusted her. And that trust was exactly what she used to keep me in the dark. Then came the memory that hit hardest. Our trip to the coast. Our anniversary trip that never happened. We had planned it months in advance. A cabin rental by the beach, just the two of us. I cleared my schedule. Maggie was excited too, or at least she seemed to be, until she wasn't. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, she sat me down and said work had come up. "There's a client from Tokyo flying in," she told me. "It's bad timing, I know, but I can't miss it. It's part of that expansion project I've been working on for months. You understand, right?" Of course I understood. I always did. I canceled the cabin. Ate the cancellation fee without complaining. Told her we'd go another time. "Next month," I said. But next month came and went, and the trip never got rebooked. She worked that weekend. Or at least that's what I believed. But now, I remembered something else. She left early, the night before her supposed meeting, citing last-minute prep at the office. She packed a small suitcase and kissed me goodbye at the door, saying she'd only be gone for 2 days, and I never questioned it. Why would I? Except now I kept replaying it. The way she avoided looking at me while she zipped up her suitcase. The way she barely responded to my "I love you" before walking out. The strange blankness in her eyes as the door shut. It didn't feel like someone headed to work. It felt like someone escaping. Then there was her mood. I used to think the distance between us was just life getting in the way. Routines, stress, jobs, the usual stuff. I figured we'd hit a lull. Every relationship has one. You just ride it out. But now I remembered how far back that chill had started. How she used to sit beside me on the couch but lean away instead of toward. How she stopped asking about my day. How the playful teasing turned into curt replies, or worse, silence. I'd walk into a room, and she'd pull her phone screen down in a blink, like some reflex she couldn't turn off. I'd ask what she was up to, and she'd say nothing or just a meme, but never show me. Sometimes I caught a glimpse of texts, just initials at the top of the thread. Once it was just the letter J. I figured it was Jess, or maybe Jason. I remember one night walking into the living room and hearing her whispering on the phone. When she saw me, she laughed, like she'd just finished a joke. She ended the call quickly and said, "Just catching up with Nat. She's going through stuff." I nodded. I trusted her, like always. But my gut, the part of me I'd taught to shut up, had twitched that night. Just a little. That same gut was screaming now. And I started remembering the fights. Not loud ones, not dramatic blow-ups. Just those cold, quiet ones where nothing ever got resolved. Ones where I'd try to talk to her about feeling disconnected and she'd dismiss it. "You're being needy," she told me once. "Can't I just have space without it meaning something?" I told her of course she could. I backed off, and with every step back I took, she seemed to step further away. And now, looking back, I saw it. All of it. It wasn't sudden. This didn't come out of nowhere. I had just convinced myself otherwise. Because when you love someone, you don't assume the worst. You give them every benefit of every doubt. You explain away their shifts in mood as stress, their absence as responsibility, their disinterest as tiredness. But now I was seeing the pattern for what it was. A slow exit. A gradual disconnection. An emotional withdrawal masked as busyness. Polite indifference disguised as independence. And all of it was deliberate. Even the way she smiled in that photo, like it had been rehearsed. Or maybe not rehearsed. Just familiar. Like she'd done it before. I thought about her pulling out of our plans. The overnights. The last-minute work dinners that turned into late returns. The weekend she said she was volunteering with coworkers, and came back with a sunburn that didn't match the cloudy weather forecast. The night she said she left her phone at the office, but her location still updated in another city an hour away. I told myself it was a glitch. I wanted it to be a glitch. Now, I wasn't so sure. It was like watching an old home video in reverse. Suddenly, every kind gesture I thought was proof of love started feeling like a distraction. Every time she brought me takeout, every surprise bottle of wine, every random "I love you" out of the blue. Was it guilt? A cover-up? A way to make sure I stayed calm, stayed trusting, stayed asleep? I didn't know what was real anymore. I felt stupid. Not just betrayed. Stupid. Because I thought we were solid. I thought we were going through a tough season. I thought the coldness would pass, and we'd come out of it stronger. But now I saw it differently. She wasn't cold because of stress. She was cold because her warmth was being spent elsewhere. The worst part? There was no single moment that confirmed it. Just a growing string of connected dots that led to one sickening conclusion. Maggie had started checking out of our marriage long before I noticed. And when I finally did notice, it was because she let me. The photo wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-off moment caught at a bad angle. It was a message I wasn't supposed to read. But now that I couldn't unread it. It haunted everything that came before. Every weekend she said she needed me time. Every text she laughed at and refused to show me. Every "you're overthinking it" she tossed at me like a shield. I was overthinking it. But not in the way she meant. I was waking up. Finally. But I didn't know what to do with that yet. Not fully. So I stayed quiet. I watched more carefully. Took mental notes. track things she didn't realize I was watching. And as I did, a quiet dread settled in. If these memories, these moments lined up this well, then what else had I missed? I didn't go looking for proof. Not at first. That's the lie people tell themselves when they're standing at the edge of something they don't want to fall into. I told myself I was just paying attention now. Just staying aware. Just being smarter than I had been. The truth is, once doubt settles in, it doesn't stay quiet. It started with something small again. Something stupid. A crumpled receipt. I found it in the pocket of her coat while I was folding laundry one Saturday morning. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't digging through her things with some grand plan. I was doing what I always did, trying to be useful, trying to keep things normal, trying to convince myself that the growing distance between us could still be repaired if I just stayed steady enough. The receipt slid out and landed on the floor. At first, I almost tossed it. It was just a receipt. But then I noticed the name at the top. An upscale restaurant downtown. The kind of place we only went to for anniversaries or birthdays. The kind of place where reservations mattered and dinners stretched into hours. The total caught my eye next. Too high for a solo meal. Then I saw it, table for two. The date was from a Thursday night 2 weeks earlier. The same night Maggie told me she was meeting a few friends after work. The same night she came home late, slightly flushed, smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't own. I remembered asking her how it went. I remembered her shrugging it off. It was fine. Nothing special. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the edge of the bed, receipt still in my fingers, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. There was still a way out, I told myself. Still an explanation. Maybe a coworker paid her back. Maybe it was a group thing and they split the bill strangely. Maybe. But the word maybe was losing its power. I waited. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Because once you accuse someone of something like this, there's no undoing it. Once the words are out, they change everything. Later that night, after she went to sleep, I sat alone in the living room with my laptop. I typed the restaurant's name into Google without really knowing why. Maybe I was hoping to torture myself. Maybe I was hoping to be proven wrong. Their social media page popped up first. I scrolled. Slowly. My heart pounding louder with every swipe. They posted daily, photos of dishes, candlelit tables, smiling couples tagged with heart emojis. And then I saw it. A photo posted the same night as the receipt. Dim lighting. A corner table I recognized instantly. 2 glasses of red wine. And there, right in the center of the frame, a woman's hand resting on the table. Maggie's hand. I knew it because of the ring. The anniversary ring I gave her. Simple gold band. Small engraving on the inside. The light caught it just enough to make it unmistakable. Across from her, partially cropped out, was a man's hand resting over hers. The caption read, "Perfect nights deserve perfect company." I felt something inside me go completely still. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't interpretation or overthinking or insecurity. This was time-stamped, location-based, undeniable reality. Same night, same place, same hand, same ring. She hadn't just lied. She had curated the lie, chosen the setting, chosen the story she'd feed me afterward. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence for a long time. I didn't feel anger right away, or sadness, or even shock. What I felt was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Like stepping outside into winter air after being in a suffocating room. Everything made sense now. The sleepovers, the canceled trip, the defensiveness, the photo with her ex, the way she'd started treating me like an obstacle instead of a partner. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a pattern. A choice repeated enough times to become routine. I went to bed beside her that night and didn't sleep at all. She breathed evenly, one arm draped across my chest like she always used to do. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the image of her hand in that photo over and over again. By morning, something in me had changed permanently. I didn't confront her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I kissed her goodbye like always, told her to have a good day, watched her leave, And that was the moment I understood something that took me years to learn. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the ease with which she lived both lives. The way she smiled at me while carrying proof of her infidelity in her pocket. The way she trusted my trust. I wasn't confused anymore. I was done pretending I didn't know. After I found the receipt and saw the photo, I expected something inside me to break. Instead, something hardened. I think I always assumed that if this ever happened, if I ever caught the person I loved in a lie that deep, I'd explode. That I'd shout or pack a bag or make a scene like in the movies. But none of that happened. What happened instead was silence. A silence that started in my chest and slowly wrapped around everything. It was almost peaceful. I didn't confront her. I didn't bring up the restaurant or the photo. I didn't even mention the receipt I had folded carefully and tucked into a drawer in my home office. Instead, I started paying attention in a way I never had before. Not because I still needed proof, no, I had more than enough, but because I wanted to see it. All of it. Maggie, for her part, didn't act any different. She still left her coffee mug in the sink every morning. Still asked me how I slept. Still sent me texts in the afternoon with links to random things, recipes, memes, a cute dog photo. Little bits of normalcy she thought were holding us together. Or maybe she thought they were distractions. Either way, she didn't seem to notice that I wasn't responding the same way anymore. I had started keeping score. Not in a spiteful way. Just quietly, like a journalist taking notes. She mentioned a meeting downtown. I noted the time and location. She said she was staying late at work. I watched her location tick into areas far from her office building. She smiled at me over dinner, said, "I love you," and I listened to the weight of it. It sounded more like an echo than something alive. The crazy thing is, once I stopped reacting, I started seeing more clearly. I saw how easily she slipped into the rhythm of her double life. How seamless the transitions were. One minute she was at brunch with friends. The next she was sitting across from me asking what movie we should watch that night. Her phone, once a casual accessory, had become an extension of her hand. She didn't leave it unattended anymore. Not even in the bathroom. She started locking the screen more often, too. Not just locking it, double-checking it was locked. That tiny habit didn't go unnoticed. None of them did. But I didn't say a word. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. She got comfortable. Almost too comfortable. She stopped trying as hard to cover things up. Maybe she thought she was in the clear. Maybe she thought I had stopped suspecting anything. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. One night, I watched her walk into the living room with a glass of wine and her phone pressed to her ear. She smiled when she saw me and gestured toward the screen. "It's Natalie," she mouthed. I nodded. But the way her smile dropped the second she turned away, it didn't match. Her whole body language changed. Softer voice. Head tilted. The kind of voice you use when you're not just talking to a friend but trying to be heard by someone who matters in a way they shouldn't. I muted the TV and just listened to the tone. Not the words, just the tone. I didn't even pretend to be interested in the show anymore. I just watched her, and she didn't notice. That was the power of silence. The more I gave it to her, the more honest her behavior became. Not intentionally, just carelessly. My absence from the emotional equation left a void she didn't bother to fill. That told me everything. One Saturday morning, she left early to grab brunch with coworkers. I watched from the upstairs window as she got into her car, made a right instead of a left, and disappeared toward the highway. Nowhere near the cafe she claimed she was headed to. 2 hours later, I checked the tracking app I'd installed a week earlier. She was at a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. Not a chain. Not a place with big lobbies or conference rooms. A quiet, discreet little place you book for one reason only. She stayed for 3 hours. Came home smelling like mint and someone else's cologne. I was on the porch when she pulled in. She looked surprised to see me sitting there. "Hey," she said, stepping out of the car. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just needed air." She smiled, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. "Want me to make coffee?" "Sure," I said. She went inside. I sat there for another 20 minutes, staring at the street, feeling absolutely nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't anymore. I had already mourned what we were. Now I was just documenting the remains. And still I said nothing. That night, she curled up beside me in bed like everything was fine. Like she wasn't lying to my face on a daily basis. Like I hadn't spent the entire afternoon tracking her movements while she played house with me in the evening. There was a power in not reacting. A dangerous, beautiful kind of power. It gave me space to observe her not as my wife, but as a stranger I was just starting to understand. Her patterns became clearer. Tuesdays and Thursdays, long nights at the gym or meetings, weekend mornings spent running errands, but always returning with the same half-effort bag of groceries and just enough change in her tone to suggest guilt. She kept talking like everything was fine. But me, I was already somewhere else. In my head, in my plans, in a place beyond heartbreak. The silence gave me control, but it also gave me something else. Time. Time to think. Time to prepare. Time to figure out how to leave in a way that wouldn't end with me begging for answers she'd never give. I started moving pieces quietly. Got a P.O. box. Found a short-term lease on a small apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a place to breathe. Somewhere without her perfume in the air. I started transferring my important documents out of the house. Birth certificate, passport, my laptop, a few personal items. All without a word. All in silence. The more I pulled away, the more relaxed she became. She stopped questioning where I was going. Stopped noticing when I took long walks or came home later than usual. As long as I didn't question her, she didn't question me. That silence became a shield. But it was also a mirror. It showed me exactly how much of myself I had given up for her approval. How many times I had swallowed discomfort just to avoid conflict. How small I had made myself in the name of keeping the peace. But peace built on lies isn't peace. It's quiet war. And I was done losing it. One night, she sat across from me at dinner and told me about a friend from work who was going through a rough time. Said she might go check in on her over the weekend. I nodded. That okay? She asked. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. She smiled, looking relieved. She didn't know I had already booked the moving truck. She didn't know the locks on my new apartment would click shut behind me 2 days later. She didn't know I had already stopped being hers a long time ago. And still I said nothing. Because silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. It was protection. It was me, reclaiming myself one unspoken word at a time. The night of the family dinner felt like a test. Not from me and not from fate. From her. It was Maggie's idea. Out of nowhere, she asked me if I'd join her for dinner at her parents' place. Mom's making hot pot, she said cheerfully. And Dad wants to see you. It's been a while. It had been a while, 8 months, maybe more. The last time I saw her parents, we were still in that phase where problems were just undercurrents, not earthquakes. Polite smiles, surface-level conversations. No one talked about anything real. Maggie always said her family was private, and I respected that. At the time, I thought it was just a cultural thing. Now I wasn't so sure. I paused before answering her. Not long, just enough for her to notice. You don't have to, she added quickly. It's just dinner. That should have been my out. But something in me said yes. Maybe because I wanted to see if they knew. Or maybe because I wanted to know how far the rot went. Was it just her? Or was this something deeper? Either way, I said, sure, let's go. We arrived at her parents' house around 6:30 p.m. It was cold outside, but warm and slightly humid in their living room, probably from the hot pot simmering in the center of the dining table. Her mom greeted us at the door with a soft smile and a wave. Her dad, as always, nodded and went back to whatever he was watching on TV. They didn't hug. They never did. Different background. Different norms. I had learned not to expect the same warmth I grew up with. But there was something more than just formality tonight. A stiffness in the air I couldn't quite place. We sat around the table, the 4 of us. Maggie filled her parents in on work, plans, the same topics she used with me to avoid anything too close to real. I mostly stayed quiet, letting the conversation move around me. Her father, Mr. Sato, didn't say much. But he watched me. He always had this look like he was assessing a job candidate instead of a son-in-law. Maggie once told me he was quiet with everyone. Not just me, but I never quite believed that. With Maggie, I saw something else in his eyes. Approval, even pride. With me, it was like I was always one answer away from failing a test I didn't know I was taking. Halfway through dinner, the conversation drifted into Japanese. That wasn't unusual. Her parents often switched languages when they were speaking between themselves, especially if the topic was emotional or sensitive. They assumed I didn't understand, and to be fair, that used to be true. But what Maggie didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that I'd lived in Osaka for 2 years before I met her. It was a job opportunity that turned into a formative chapter of my life. I wasn't fluent, not anymore, but I understood enough. More than enough. At first, her parents just talked about how quiet I was. Her mother said I looked tired. Her father said something vague about Americans being distant and slow to read the air. I let it slide. They weren't being cruel, just blunt. Honest in a way that didn't bother me anymore. But then Maggie excused herself to go to the restroom. And that's when the twist came. Her father leaned back, took a sip of his beer, and turned to her mother. He spoke softly, but I heard every word. Demo, Maggie wa dou shuru tsurori da? Biharo shigiru. Ichumade mochutanai. But what is Maggie planning to do? He's too weak. This won't last. Her mother responded with a quiet sigh. Something about Maggie being torn and still figuring it out. Then something I didn't catch fully, about Jason and timing. I didn't react, didn't blink, just kept my expression still as my stomach dropped through the floor. Her father wasn't just commenting. He knew. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't questioning. He was analyzing, strategizing, as if I was a temporary inconvenience Maggie hadn't figured out how to shed yet. Weak. That word echoed louder than anything else. Not unfit. Not confused. Not even naive. Weak. Like I was something to be stepped over. An obstacle, not a person. Placeholder, not a partner. And the thing that broke me wasn't the insult, it was the implication. That my marriage, from their perspective, had already ended. That the conversations I hadn't heard were already happening behind closed doors, in languages I was never supposed to understand. Maggie returned a few minutes later, smiling like nothing happened. She placed a small dish of pickles on the table and said, "Dad, Mark likes these." Her dad nodded without a word. I looked at her and said, "Thank you." That was all. Just those 2 words. But inside I felt something die. That dinner lasted another 30 minutes. Maybe less. Maggie chatted. Her mom served fruit. Her dad finished another beer. On the surface, it was a calm, simple evening. But for me, the room was filled with ghosts. Every polite nod I gave was a scream held back. Every, delicious, I offered was a clenched jaw. Every movement I made was mechanical, controlled, calculated. I wanted to leave, but I stayed, because I wanted to see it through. As we walked back to the car, Maggie asked, "That wasn't so bad, right?" I looked at her and said, "No, not bad at all." She smiled. "They really do like you, you know? They just have their own way of showing it." I nodded. Of course. And in that moment, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. It wasn't just her betrayal anymore. It was the realization that I was never part of the equation. Not really. To them, I was a foreigner in every sense of the word. Not just in culture or language, but in values, in expectations, in worth. I wasn't a partner. I was a phase. A choice she made out of curiosity, maybe even rebellion, but not something meant to last. Her father's words rang in my head the entire drive home. Too weak. This won't last. And for the first time since this all started, I stopped trying to prove him wrong. I just let the silence sit between us in the car, stretching long and wide, like the distance between the man I thought I was and the man they saw. And that's when I realized something important, maybe the most important thing so far. I didn't just lose Maggie. I had never really been seen by her at all. I thought Jason was the beginning and end of it. Turns out he was just one chapter. I found out from a mutual connection, someone she didn't know I still talk to, that during a work trip a year ago, Maggie had an affair with someone from her professional network. It lasted longer than she admitted, maybe even overlapped with our anniversary. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was routine, quiet, practiced deceit. I kept wondering how long I'd been playing the role of a placeholder in a story she'd already rewritten without me. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a husband. I saw a man finally waking up from a dream that was never mutual. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just left. Quietly, I found a small apartment across town and started building something of my own, brick by brick. I didn't leave a note, just enough absence to make the point. The truth is, Maggie's betrayal wasn't the end. It was the proof the end had already happened. I'd been living in the shell of a marriage. Now I was finally outside of it, breathing clean air. And for the first time in a long time, I felt real.